Today we're going to have a look at how to rationalise the denominator. But first of all, could you just have a quick go at these three questions? So if you could just stop the video here for 3 or 4 minutes and attempt these questions. Make sure you try and simplify your answers where possible too. So let's have a quick look at how to do these. Find the length of each side. So first of all, we know this is a square because we know we've got those 4 little lines on each side. So to work out the length of each side, well, it must be 2 numbers multiplied together to give me 50 that are the same. Well, it has to be the square root of 50 times the square root of 50. So each side must be of the length square root of 50. Again, we're not just going to leave our answers like that. We've been doing this work on the surds so that we know how to simplify things from this situation. That's the square root of 25 times the square root of 2. So we can just change that into 5 lots of the square root of 2. Now each side of the square is going to be 5 root 2. And rather than write it all out, you should be able to see that that's going to give me 4 lots of 5 root 2. And that is 20 lots of the square root of 2. Final one, find x. It's a fairly confusing looking diagram here. We've got a right angled triangle, of which we know the longest side and one of the shorter sides. So we can use Pythagoras' theorem to work this out. So when we're finding a shorter side, we're going to be subtracting. So it's going to be 13 squared, take away 7 squared, will tell me what x squared is. So 13 squared is 169. 7 squared is 49. So that must be x squared. 169 take away 49 is 120. So to find out what x is, we're going to square root 120. So we've got x equals the square root of 120 again. We're not going to just leave our answers like that. We need to try and simplify that into the form a root b, which is what we've been doing for the last couple of lessons. So we try and find the square number that goes into 120. And one of the square numbers that goes into 120 is 4. So that's the square root of 4 times the square root of 30. We know what the square root of 4 is, and that's 2 times the square root of 30, which is x. What we're going to go and do today, this is a fraction which on the bottom has got what we call an irrational number, the square root of 2, something that goes on forever and that can't be written as a fraction. So what we need to do is basically take this surd off the bottom of the fraction, which is why it's called rationalising the denominator. So there's one fairly obvious way to do this here. If I've got the square root of 2 on the bottom of the fraction, then I can remove that by multiplying both the top and bottom by the square root of 2. Now, that leaves me with, on the top I've got 5 times the square root of 2, which is 5 root 2. And on the bottom, the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is 2. And that's that done. We've removed the surd from the bottom. We've rationalised the denominator. Again, to get rid of this one here, to get rid of the square root of 5 off the bottom of this fraction, we would just multiply both the top and bottom by the square root of 5. So if you ever work out a question like the one on the page before and you end up with a 12 divided by the square root of 5, you won't be able to leave your answer like that. You've got to then realise you need to rationalise the denominator to leave us with something slightly different. So in this situation, we've got 12 times the square root of 5, and on the bottom, the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is just 5. Okay, next set. Okay, so we need to get rid of the surd again on the bottom here. Now, you could choose to multiply everything by 3 root 2, but you don't actually need to. You could just multiply by the square root of 2 here, and that will get rid of it. So I'm going to multiply both top and bottom by the square root of 2. So on the top, that leaves us with 8 times the square root of 2, which is just going to be written as 8 root 2. And on the bottom, we've got 3 root 2 times the square root of 2. Well, I'm still going to have 3 in there, but I've also now got root 2 times root 2, which is 2. So we've now got 8 root 2 on the top, and on the bottom we've got 6. Now we've not quite finished with this question actually, because there's something more we can do here. If I had a fraction with just 8 on top and 6 on the bottom, I would make sure to simplify it. And this situation is no different. So we'd need to simplify that down. 2 goes into both 8 and 6, and I could simplify that down to 4 lots of the square root of 2 over 3. Okay, starting to look at these slightly trickier situations now. Here I need to get rid of the surd off the bottom, the square root of 2. But you'll notice that if I multiply the bottom line by just the square root of 2, it won't disappear, because I'd still have the square root of 2 times 1. So what we need to do here is use the difference of 2 squares. So to get rid of the surd here, what I'd have to do is multiply by the square root of 2 take away 1. So if that was plus 1, I'd multiply it by minus 1. And if it was minus 1, I'd multiply it by the surd plus 1. And the same on the top. And if we do that, then on the top we've got 3 times the square root of 2 and 3 times minus 1. On the bottom, we've essentially got a set of double brackets to multiply, which is what we did last lesson, so we should know what we're doing here. So the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 will give me 2. Then we've got the square root of 2 times minus 1, which gives us minus the square root of 2. 1 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 2, and 1 times minus 1 is minus 1. So now we just need to tidy it up a little bit. You'll notice this bit in the middle will always cancel. That's why we chose the difference of 2 squares, plus 1 and minus 1, so that this bit in the middle will always cancel. So if we go down to the next line, on top we've still got 3 root 2 minus 3, that won't cancel. But on the bottom, these middle terms will disappear, leaving us with just 2 take away 1. So it's actually just divide by 1, so I don't even need to write anything. The answer is just 3 root 2 take away 3. We'll just do one more. Okay, so in this situation I need to get rid of the surd off the bottom. So we're fine with what's on the top, it's what's on the bottom that we need to get rid of. So because it's the square root of 3 add 5, I'm going to multiply both the top and bottom by the square root of 3 take away 5. So we've essentially got 2 pairs of double brackets that we need to expand here. So let's go and do that. The square root of 3 times the square root of 3 gives me 3. Square root of 3 times minus 5 is minus 5 root 3. Then we've got minus 5 times the square root of 3 is another lot of minus 5 root 3. And minus 5 times minus 5 is positive 25. So that's the top sorted, which we can simplify in a moment. Again, we've chosen the difference of 2 squares, so remember these middle 2 terms will be cancelling in a second here. Square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3. Square root of 3 times minus 5 is minus 5 root 3. 5 times the square root of 3 is positive 5 root 3, and 5 times minus 5 is minus 25. So now we just need to tidy everything up. Remember, I've chosen the difference of two squares, so those two terms in the middle there disappear. So we just need to tidy the top up. I've got 3 and 25 on the top, so that's 28. Then I've got minus 5 root 3, minus 5 root 3, so I've got 28 minus 10 lots of the square root of 3. And on the bottom, remember those middle terms will disappear, and I've got 3 take away 25. 3 take away 25 is minus 22. It can be simplified a little bit, so we'll go around and just simplify it ever so slightly. 2 goes into all of the things that are available here. So if we just divide everything by 2, we end up with 14 minus 5 lots of the square root of 3, all divided by minus 11. And you could do something about that minus 11 as well, because it's not often you see anything left with the minus on the bottom, but I'm going to leave it there for now. Can you have a go at the questions in the book for me? So if you could just pause the video. Okay, here's a grade A style question, and I'd just like you to have about 3 minutes to have a go at it. I think it'd be 4 marks in an exam, so see if you can spot where you've got to pick up the marks for this question. Right, so let's have a look at how we'd answer this. To multiply two fractions, it's just the tops multiplied together and then the bottoms multiplied together, so 3 times 2 gives me 6, and the square root of 2 times the square root of 4 is the square root of 8. Nice simple start. Of course, we're not happy with our answers being left with a third on the bottom. We need to rationalise the denominator. So to do that, I'll multiply top and bottom by the square root of 8. So now I've got 6 times the square root of 8 on top, and on the bottom I'm left with 8. Again, we're still not quite finished. That can be simplified. 6 and 8. 2 goes into both of them, so we'll call that 3 root 8 over 4.